Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The United States sends a letter to Israel demanding that it facilitate an immediate surge in humanitarian assistance into Gaza. The two-party system of Democrats and Republicans still dominates the U.S. voting process. And a U.S.-based non-governmental organization is addressing humanitarian and development challenges in Africa through technology. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Israeli jets bombarded southern Lebanon and Beirut southern suburbs on Wednesday, killing at least 21 people, including a city mayor, according to Lebanese officials. Hezbollah acting leader Sheikh Naim Qassem has declared that the Lebanese militant group will ramp up attacks on Israel in response to an Israeli airstrike Monday on an apartment building in northern Lebanon. Meantime, the U.S. has sent a letter to Israel demanding it facilitate an immediate surge in humanitarian assistance into Gaza. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob has more.
With the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsening, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin sent a letter to their Israeli counterparts calling for concrete commitments to improve the humanitarian situation within 30 days. A failure to do so, they say, could have, quote, implications for U.S. policy.
The Secretary, along with Secretary Austin, thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again to see that the level of assistance making it into Gaza comes back up from the very, very low levels that it is at today.
According to the U.S., a similar request was sent to Israel in April that led to increased humanitarian assistance into Gaza. But that assistance is now down by more than 50% from what it was at its peak.
The land routes are the most effective way to get aid flowing to the civilians that need it most. So, of course, we want to see those corridors open up. That's something that the Secretary continues to emphasize in his calls.
The administration declining this week to discuss what would happen should Israel fail to meet the letter's demands. Is the U.S. military debating right now whether or not to withhold military support to Israel?
Israel continues to receive support from the United States, whether it be through FMS sales or what you're seeing, that we're doing in Israel self-defense. I just don't have more to provide.
A U.S. THAAD battery, along with dozens of American troops to operate it, began arriving in Israel this week.
You've seen our destroyers engage from the sea. This is now a land-based capability that will be able to help defend against another ballistic missile attack if Iran did choose to respond in that way.
Iran has launched 2 direct attacks against Israel, with Iran most recently firing about 200 ballistic missiles toward the country. Tel Aviv has not yet responded to the latest attack. Reporting at the Pentagon, I'm Carla Babb, VOA News.
For more on the fighting in the Middle East, I'm joined live from here in Washington by Nola Haynes, a national security and foreign policy expert at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. Nola, this is not the first time the U.S. has asked Israel to consider a ceasefire and hold talks to end the war with Gaza. Do you think Israel will comply this time round?
Well, Israel has responded saying that they will move quickly to adhere to allowing for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. And, I want to kind of reaffirm here that since day one, the United States has said 3 things must happen. The release of the hostages, that's number 1. Number 2, humanitarian aid, a ceasefire for humanitarian aid to get in. So there's one overarching permanent ceasefire. And then there are the ceasefires that are called for so aid can get in. And then the third piece is for a 2-state solution. So the United States has not changed, its posture in terms of negotiating for those 3 things.
So what is what was likely to happen if Israel does not comply?
Well, like I said, they have, and they said that they will move quickly to allow for humanitarian aid to get in, because this was a pretty forceful maneuver on the part of the United States because the situation is so dire, increasingly dire in Gaza.
Nola, what about, how critical is that U.S. military aid for Israel?
So what's really hard for a lot of people to understand because of a lot of the public optics that have come out of Gaza is how can the United States continue to assist Israel? And this is how. So I'm going to list three important reasons why the U.S. and Israel relationship exists the way that it does. First and foremost, security and defense. Israel stands alone in the Middle East in terms of being a democratic partner to the United States. And as we are seeing in real time, they are facing threats from 4 different fronts. So that is a very real thing. And the fact that Israel does strike a level of balance of power in the region and our shared value systems being both democratic countries, especially in a region like the Middle East. So while the United States is definitely trying to apply diplomatic pressure regarding Gaza, there are other concerns, Iran being one of those concerns, Hezbollah in Lebanon being another concern, that makes Israel quite vulnerable considering where it sits in that region.
You talk about the various fronts that Israel is facing. There's the Iran threat, there's the Hezbollah in Lebanon as well, and now Gaza. How can the U.S. help, even though they do want Israel to comply with the demands they've made after writing this letter? How else can the United States and the international community help quell this crisis?
Well, as with the first missile strike with Iran, there was a coordinated coalition that came together that was able to make sure that none of those missiles landed inside of Israel, and it was very successful. And now another part of that is a ground offensive with THAAD missile system, with the THAAD missile system arriving in different pieces in Israel, along with ground support to help operate that system. So it's a ground offensive in terms of the THAAD missile defense system, which stands for the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile Defense System. And then also with the support of troops to help operate that system, which is designed to protect against missile threats, which we've seen from Iran at least twice now. And Lebanon Hezbollah has made it quite clear that they are also planning to attack Israel.
Nola, many thanks for your insight into this. Nola Haynes is a national security and foreign policy expert at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. Now to the race for the White House. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both trying to reach the relatively small number of voters who say they have still not decided who to support. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns looks at the undecideds in this election.
Some Americans are already making their choice for president, with early voting underway in many states. But there remain voters who say they are undecided between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
I just want to see, I want to understand who they are. They haven't really been involved much, and they're new to the entire political climate on both sides. They come from both interesting different backgrounds, and I want to see who they are and how they represent their candidates.
Undecided voters are about 3% of the electorate, according to public opinion polls. John Johnson is a research fellow at Marquette University's law school.
For a lot of voters, they haven't started paying that much attention yet. And so I think when you come up and ask them, that's the answer they might give. Some people also in the Midwest might be reticent to tell you who they'll vote for. So there could be some of that as well.
Targeted campaigning by Harris and Trump is moving some undecided voters, says University of Massachusetts political scientist Tatice Nteta.
The population of the undecided voter is shrinking, and it shrinks with each day. Most people are going to make up their minds before Election Day, and what's really going to matter is going to be the on-the-ground mobilization of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and in what is likely going to be an extremely close election.
Trump and Harris have different challenges in convincing undecided voters, says Brookings Institution senior fellow Darrell West.
He needs to reassure Americans that, one, he respects the rule of law, that he's not going to be crazy and chaotic if he becomes a president. She, on the other hand, is less experienced. She took positions a few years ago that were much more liberal than the policies that she's espousing now. So she has to reassure voters that it's the Kamala Harris of today that they're going to get as president.
Trump, as the better known of the candidates, has both advantages and disadvantages when it comes to undecided voters, says Johnson.
Donald Trump is a candidate running for the third time for president, so most people have strong opinions about him already. And so of that sliver of people who remain undecided, just a single-digit percentage number of people, both parties are working hard to convince them to vote.
That's because those undecided voters could make the difference in close swing state races that will likely decide who wins. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
VOA's Jackson Vunganyi is following the presidential election and has this explainer on the U.S. two-party system.
Though America has seen a number of political parties throughout its history, the two-party system of Democrats and Republicans still dominates the political process. Let's see how that works.
The 2024 presidential election promises to be a showdown between two deeply unpopular candidates. One plagued by questions about his age and ability, the other facing federal criminal charges. But while a record 63% of American voters polled are unhappy with the options presented by the two major parties, Democrat and Republican, it is all but certain that the next president will belong to one of them, as have all presidents since 1856. The dominance of the two-party system may seem strange. The U.S. Constitution says nothing about political parties, and George Washington, himself the first and only president elected without representing a political party, warned against them in his farewell address. But even before Washington left office, two factions had formed within his own administration that would become the country's first political parties. Since then, parties have sometimes split or dissolved, with new ones forming to replace them. But such upheavals usually settle into a new two-party system. The main reason for this pattern is that the U.S. electoral system relies mostly on winner-take-all voting, where voters may only select one option, and the single candidate with the most votes wins the election. While this system has the benefit of simplicity, it encourages different factions and interests to cluster together into one party to have any chance of defeating their opponents, who, of course, will do the same. By contrast, countries with multi-party elections often have proportional representation in which each party receives a portion of parliamentary seats matching their share of the vote. Other systems include ranked choice or multiple round voting, which allow voters to express more particular preferences, knowing they'll be able to shift their votes to a more viable candidate if needed. However, even multi-party elections often result in a liberal or left-wing coalition versus a conservative or center-right one. In some ways, the two-party system simply reflects the nature of the political spectrum. So far, no third-party candidate in the U.S. has become president. Often, third-party candidates are accused of acting as spoilers by diverting potential votes from the major party candidate seen as ideologically closer to their position. Still, as voters feel increasingly dissatisfied with their options, the 2024 election cycle has seen renewed calls for electoral reform and support for third-party candidates like Cornel West and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. With the 2024 election predicted to be a close one, third parties may yet have an impact, though perhaps not in the way their voters might hope.
That was a look at how the two-party political system works in America.
Thursday on Africa 54, we'll tell you why understanding swing states is essential to grasping how America selects its president, so be sure to tune in. A Senate impeachment hearing against Kenya's deputy president are underway on Wednesday. The hearing is ongoing after a court said the proceedings were constitutional, clearing the way for a vote on his dismissal this week. Kenya's National Assembly voted last week to impeach Rigathi Gachagua on 11 charges, including corruption, undermining the government, and stirring ethnic hatred. Gachagua is denying all the charges. He says the impeachment motion, backed by opposition lawmakers and allies of President William Ruto, is based on falsehoods that constitute a political lynching. For more on the ongoing impeachment hearing against Kenyan Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi by Kenya Television Network's Francis Ontomwa. Francis, what more can you tell us about today's proceedings?
Well, it's what many are calling a constitutional moment for Kenya. It's unprecedented, and it's the first time that a deputy president is being subjected to such a process here in this country. And therefore, there is a lot of focus. So as we speak right now, there is a quasi-judicial process going on in the Senate where he's being, the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, is being subjected through cross-examinations, trying to put up a case for himself, trying to shield himself from this impending impeachment. But from the look of things, this thing has already, it's a boat that has already sailed and left the station. And therefore, at this point, we are only expecting, it's a matter of hours really to know the fate of Rigathi Gachagua. And as we've indicated, the Senate might take cue from the National Assembly, which is the lower house that the other day voted overwhelmingly to get him out of office. You remember, out of the number of the members of parliament, over 281 against 44 voted to impeach him out of office. And as you've rightly put, some of the allegations that are facing him are actually 11 counts of charges is trying to fight in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And part of that being the question of corruption, is being accused of amassing massive wealth through illicit means, undermining the president, undermining the judiciary, some of the allegations that are facing Rigathi Gachagua.
Francis, with all that drama going on, as we saw with the Gen Zs in June and July, are there any street reactions in Nairobi or elsewhere in the country? Are there any demonstrations of any kind?
Absolutely, Esther. And public opinion is divided as regards this impeachment. There is a section of Kenyans who are supporting this process and saying it's in the right direction of really fighting corruption. But at the same time, there are those who are opposed to it, and they are saying that it is clearly political lynching, as you had put it. And there is a group of people who are also sort of observers and critics who are saying that this looks like a diversionary tactic really to sway Kenyans from not focusing on the real issue that are dogging the country. There is unemployment, corruption, all these are big subjects in this country. And some see this as a way to really sway them off these subjects.
And very quickly, Francis, are Kenyans concerned there might be chaos as a result of this hearing?
Wow, yeah. There is a group of school of thought, rather, that this could be leading into some sort of tension in the country, especially between the tribes that are involved, that are represented by either the president or the deputy president. The National Commission for Integration and Cohesion in the country did a survey the other day, and they did a report indicating that this might occasion tension in the country. Right. And that has also been supported by a group of lobby groups that have been pushing for a resolution to this issue.
Francis, many thanks for your excellent reporting. Francis Ontomwa speaking to us from Kenya Television Network in Nairobi. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, how a collaborative initiative is improving lives in Africa. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, the war in the Middle East is intensifying. 1 year after Israel invaded Gaza in an effort to eliminate Hamas, now it's attacking Lebanon to contain Hezbollah. Israel is responding to a brutal attack by Hamas on its citizens on October 7, 2023, where 1,200 men, women and children were killed and over 200 were taken hostage. What will it take for hostilities to stop? Join me, Vincent McCory, and my guests this week on Straight Talk Africa.
live in the digital age, and parents across the world are dealing with the challenge of trying to manage screen time and to understand the content of their children's digital engagement. Even worse, some parents' use of technology is distracting them from their children. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will explore the new challenges of parenting in the digital age and long-term effects of smartphones on children's development. We will also ask parents and experts on ways to overcome digital parenting struggles. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, nearly 3 million people have fled Sudan after 18 months of war in a still growing exodus. The United Nations warned, with 25,000 fleeing to neighboring Chad just in the first week of October. Mamadou Diane Balde, the UN Sudan Regional Refugee Coordinator, says those numbers represent, quote, a disaster directly linked to the increasing brutality of the conflict. Wednesday is World Food Day, and while the world's farmers produce more than enough food to feed the planet's nearly 8 billion people, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says hunger and malnutrition are a fact of life for billions of people. 733 million people globally are short of food because of conflict, marginalization, climate change, poverty, and economic downturns, according to Guterres. And the Libyan Football Federation is criticizing Nigeria's decision to withdraw from the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier in Libya and is threatening to take legal action. On Monday, Nigeria's national football team, the Super Eagles, walked out citing safety concerns after being stranded at a local airport in Libya without food and internet access for more than 16 hours. Chorus International is a non-governmental organization based in Baltimore, Maryland, operating in 35 countries. It addresses humanitarian and development challenges in Africa and helps local authorities adopt technology to improve transparency, accountability, and efficiency in resource management and service delivery. Technology correspondent Paul Ndiho joins us now with more. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther, and hello, everyone. In collaboration with local authorities, Chorus International uses tech for development, digital platforms in Sierra Leone and South Sudan to streamline data, eliminate ghost workers, and improve service delivery in education, healthcare, and other public services. To learn more, Hannah Graham, Managing Director of CGA Technologies, shares her insights on this show about the collaborative initiative.
We're CGA Technologies, so we're a consultancy. We're part of the Chorus International family, and we're dedicated to using data to improve service delivery, particularly in education and health and social protection. A lot of what we do is we work with governments, national governments, often in sub-Saharan Africa, but beyond. And we support them to to use data to improve the way that service is delivered and to make sure that populations can better access those services.
There are a lot of people who have said that data is the new oil, and to your point, a lot of governments are leveraging that data to improve services for their people. When it comes to data, Africans are not collecting enough data.
There really is a lack of data, or at least of good quality data, in most of the places that we work. Data is, of course, very valuable, and the data, especially of a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of the people that we support governments to collect data on, often are, the most vulnerable in societies, children, vulnerable people. And so the data of those people is a really precious resource, and there's a much higher responsibility to protect and to use that data responsibly. But certainly the lack of data is a big problem, and it means that governments can't adequately plan for and deliver services as effectively as they need to. We see examples in education, for example, of governments just not really able to plan and deliver education services well, because they really just actually don't have a clear picture of who the children are, the learners are that they're trying to reach, how many they are and where they are.
What type or kind of data are we talking about?
Great question. So for example, in the education sphere, which I just mentioned, We do a lot of work with governments in education in Sierra Leone and in South Sudan. Similarly in the health sector and in the social protection sector, who collect data on schools, on teachers, on learners in the classroom. But often what they're doing is they're collecting data on an annual basis, so maybe once a year. They'll do a survey where they'll have enumerators visit each school, and they'll kind of just take a note of what's happening at that school on a given day, the teachers who were there, the condition of the school on that day, the number of learners who were there. And what it means is the government are using that survey, those survey results, to plan for what they need to budget for, how they need to manage their resources for the rest of the year. But what they're using as a result of that is they might just have aggregate numbers of learners in a classroom. And what that really means when you break it down is that you don't know if you have the same children who start at the beginning of an academic year as finish. What we're saying and what we're doing and how we're supporting governments is by saying you need to have much more data, you need to generate much more data, and then you really need to figure out how you're going to use that in a more effective way to plan and deliver services.
One of the things that I see as a challenge is how they input data. Most people are still writing on a piece of paper and put it in a folder and stack it away. Are we talking about different inputs of data, let's say using technology to do that in some of these places that you operate?
But we're often working, in rural healthcare centres or schools in hard-to-reach areas. Working with, teachers, at the last mile, where digital literacy might be quite low, of course, is a challenge. However, the world is increasingly digitalized, and actually, mostly what we find is that people have, a really high degree of interest in wanting to learn these skills, and actually. We really find when people understand the value of data and what it means for them, not just that it's being reported to go somewhere else, but that they can see the benefits themselves. They can understand their trends. They can understand how their school is performing, or they can, a healthcare center can make sure that its payroll is being regularly updated, and they know who is meant to be working at their facility on a day-to-day basis. We find that even where digital literacy is low, and that can be a struggle, and our staff and the government officials we work with, sometimes do have to do some basic IT training as part of their work. People are very willing to learn, and especially where they see, a real-world impact.
Amazing stuff. Hannah Graham is the Managing Director of CGA Technologies, the tech arm of Chorus International. That's today's report. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Paul. Be sure to watch Paul Ndiho's Technology Report each Wednesday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.